Well, thank you. Thanks for coming along, and welcome everyone here in the room, and also welcome online at home if you're in your lounge room watching this. We're doing a seminar tonight on anger and disappointment, and it's quite topical at the moment, but before I begin I just need to set the scene of where this material comes from. This material is drawn from an organisation called Living Wisdom. And Living Wisdom is a combination of good psychology, good theology and life skills. And so here are some comments from people that have done the Living Wisdom course and what they've said about it, but it just gives you a bit of a background where the material comes from. It's material that helps to teach your mind to be your friend. That's the whole goal of it. Romans 12:2 about making your mind, renewing your mind and making your mind your friend. Being transformed by the renewing of our mind. Freeing ourselves from the fear of man, fear of people, and we all seem to have that at some level. It's making friends with your life. It's gaining the confidence to become all that God meant you to be. And if you don't have a faith in God, we just say it gives you the confidence to become all you can be. Learning how to respond to difficult people in your life. Has anyone got difficult people in their lives? Everyone always nods to that one. Everyone knows a difficult person, don't they? Maybe we're the difficult person. That's a question we sometimes have to ask. It's changing life patterns that just don't work anymore. And so this material actually gives us the tools and the wisdom to actually make changes in our life to bring us peace and progress us and give us the confidence to actually move forward and become healthy, to become healthy thinkers and healthy in our actions as well. So some things, I'm going to say a lot of things tonight, and you will get notes at the end, so you don't have to take notes, you don't have to remember everything. It's a lot of information, it'll all come at once, but I will give you those notes as you leave tonight. But it's important to know that you may not agree with everything I say. You may not, and that's okay. You just shelve the things you don't, but I can guarantee tonight you will hear things that you will find extremely useful. So shelve the things you don't agree with or don't know how to process at the moment, and really hold tight to the things that resonate with you. That's how we approach this material. So the saying is, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's what we're saying here. Don't throw everything out just because you mightn't agree with a couple of things. Listen carefully because there's some gold in this. But the topic is anger, and our society is anger ignorant. You can just tell by those images up there of how many instances or times that anger can arise. It can arise in relationships, which can cause breakdown, divorce. It can be racially motivated, where there's disconnect between cultures. Road rage, has anyone experienced road rage before? Like, we can see it on the roads. It can happen over social media. Our jails are full. Our women's refuges are overflowing. Our divorce rates are increasing, and anger is key to this. And that's why I felt it was really important to address. Now, I know you're here because you're probably thinking about children that you're dealing with, but we need to deal with it as adults and children. So I'm going to be talking about both tonight. But anger can be described as disappointment energy. Disappointment energy, because at some level it's about dealing with disappointment. So it's a pretty powerful statement, but anger is the cause of more human suffering than any other condition. That's pretty strong, isn't it? The cause of more human suffering than any other condition. So no basic emotion has this much damage. What we do is we think if we have a cathartic release, if we get it out, if we beat the pillow, beat the punching bag, scream, yell, kick, shout and let it all out, we think that's going to help. Some people do. Some people will say holding it in, having self-control, suppressing it, trying harder, behaving myself, getting a grip I can do all things in Christ who strengthens. That is called white knuckling it. And that can actually manifest in different ways. It can come out in alcohol abuse. It can come out with just quitting and running away from the situation. It can even turn into bullying of children if it's suppressed, or just very cold relationships. It can also be the result of just emotional exhaustion, just actually burning the candle at both ends and running out of energy. Life's just too demanding. Or it can be that just two people continually wind each other up every day, and that's emotionally exhausting as well. We're going to go into a lot of the causes behind it. I was hesitant to show this picture, but every time I hear this story, I just think, where did it start? How did that start? That relationship, do you all know the story? I mean, it's been everywhere, hasn't it? With dear Hannah there, I just thought that she would have married and gone into a relationship and thought life was going to be good. Her expectations would have been realistic, perhaps high, but did she ever imagine that was going to be the end result of that relationship? She couldn't have. And this is how it starts. Our frustrations and irritations, if they're not managed, they do turn into anger. And if that anger isn't managed, it turns into rage. And if that rage isn't managed, it turns into awful situations like this, and murder is an example of that. And it's quite horrific and confronting, isn't it? To think that a frustration can actually end that. And that's why I'm really motivated to speak about this, because I think anger is not addressed well. And when I've studied the material and read the material, I thought this really does deal with the issue well. And so what our response to being frustrated and irritated should be is a centred response, a balanced response. Anger in itself is neutral, but it can turn into something negative, or in some cases it can actually be turned into something positive. Daniel Morecambe, the case there, that the anger those parents felt, and I'm sure it's done a lot of damage, the pain of that situation, but they have channeled that anger and they've actually started a cause. And you hear that often, don't you? Where people are heavily disappointed, grieved, and they turn that energy into something where it's going to help others. So with anger, you can have those two responses I spoke about. You can clam up, where you emotionally withdraw, which results in passive aggression, and that then results in resentful risk, silence, depression, separation, emotional isolation, and frigidity. That's the withdrawal. Now that always on the surface looks like the better one. The other one is the blow up, the active aggression, where there's a verbal, emotional, physical abuse. And what it does, it brings initial relief, but then regret usually follows. So we can have the clam up or we can have the blow up. Both are equally painful in relationships. It looks like the blow up because it can be abusive is more, but having people isolate themselves from you and cutting you off can just be as emotionally painful. So the image of a boiling pot on the stove, we can either, when the heat's turned up, we can either release the lid, and that's the blow up, or we can screw the lid on tighter, and that's the clam up, or there's a more logical thing to do, which people don't normally do, and that's to take it off the heat or find out the source. What is actually causing the anger in the first place? The other two aren't dealing with it effectively, but taking it off the source is really key. But how do we know what the source is? So using our model here of the iceberg representing us, the anger, which is the behaviour, is at the top, and that's what people can see. People see our behaviour, we see our behaviour, That's exposed. That's above the water. What lies underneath behaviour, like anger, is our feelings. What lies underneath our feelings is what we're telling ourselves, the tracks in our mind, our self-talk, what we're thinking, what we're telling ourselves. So the thinking impacts the feelings, impacts the behaviour. And I think we all know that. But we need to dig deeper. There's something that drives our thinking, and that is our beliefs. Now, our beliefs are starting to get below the surface. They're getting down there. They are things we've picked up along the way, and we start to think our beliefs are us. They're our beliefs, they're who we are, but they're not actually. They're just things we've collected on the way because of the experiences we've had. But underneath those beliefs are the assumptions that we've made about life. Now, assumptions are untested beliefs. They're untested. So children all of the time are making assumptions about life. They're assuming this because that happened. They're assuming the teacher doesn't like them because they came to school in a bad mood that day. They believe that they're responsible for their parents' divorce. They're reading life and they're interpreting it in their own way, and it's becoming an assumption about life. I'm responsible for my mother's feelings because when I do good things, she's happy. That's an assumption. Therefore, I must be responsible for other people's feelings. The belief is I'm responsible for other people's feelings, so my thinking will follow that, and so will my feelings and behaviour. We're talking specifically about anger. So with anger, an example might be an assumption that was made, whether it be early in life or not, but usually they are. The assumption is when I got angry, I got what I wanted and I felt safe. Now that's an assumption that's been made. So I was feeling a bit unsafe. I got angry and I got what I wanted. It made me feel safe. Assumption. And it goes whoomp, and it stays there. It becomes pretty solid. But life goes on, behaviour goes on, and this is happening all the time with lots of things. But what happens is that assumption turns into the belief. As an example, it can turn into many, but as an example, it can turn into anger is a way to stay in control. My belief is if I get angry, I can control things around me. But underneath, that's because it makes me feel safe. I feel safe when I'm in control. So the thinking that then follows is anger is okay if things aren't going my way. I'll have a tantrum, I'll yell, I'll scream, I'll get things so they're back in order again, and then I feel in control, and then I feel safe. We forget the safe part though. I feel in control. Things are going my way. So it's really interesting, isn't it? That something right down there is driving everything up here, right out to our behaviour. Because that there, if anger is okay and things aren't going my way, the feelings are going to be, I'm starting to feel nervous or anxious, I'm going to get angry, and then the behaviour follows, the controlling behaviour follows. And we do see that at school here, don't we, Leonie? We see that with children here, that when they start to feel unsafe, they can quickly turn into anger because they're trying to control their environment. So we see it already happening when they're young. But then as we get older, we learn to mask it a bit better. We don't tantrum and kick on the floor anymore, but we do other things that is like tantruming and getting angry. So it's really important to know that we're driven by emotional needs. There's lots of needs we have, I'm not talking about physical needs, but emotional needs. We have 4 basic emotional needs, and everything we do is driven to meet one of these 4 needs. So it's important to know them. So the first one is we're driven to meet the need that we are worth something, that we are significant in some way. We are driven to meet that. Now, you can probably think of examples of how you yourself have been driven to feel significant in your achievements, in your performances, in how you've presented at work. So we ourselves can do that, but our need is that we feel significant and that we are of worth and value. Another need we have is that, of course, we all want to feel safe. We have a strong need for survival, to feel secure and have a sense of belonging. So it's an emotional need that everyone has. Everyone has the emotional need to progress. And that means you've got some stimulus in life, something to look forward to, some hope in the future, and a sense of progress. Everyone has that need. And everyone has the need for innocence, to feel guiltless and blameless. We can see that so clearly in children because they will lie to stay innocent. We will twist the truth to stay innocent. So there are 4 emotional needs. And remember, we have thousands of beliefs that drive our behaviour to meet those 4 needs. So important to remember those as we go through. So when we're talking about anger, anger's a symptom of a deeper problem. We have to remember that. Anger's a symptom of a deeper problem. And so if there's a threat to our significance, or a threat to our safety, or a threat to our hope, or even a threat to our innocence, it can turn into something unpleasant, an emotional response that might be fear, anxiety, panic, hopelessness, depression. Like there's a lot it can turn into, but it's when those needs are threatened we can start to feel that. Now, rather than showing a lot of those emotions, they can quickly default to anger, because what we do is we don't like to be vulnerable as we get older. We like to put on a facade, or we like to have some bodyguards around us. That's our behaviours that keep us safe. And anger is a bodyguard, so we feel safe behind it. If I can get angry and deal with it like that, I don't have to be vulnerable and share that I'm scared, or that I feel hopeless, or that I feel guilty. So anger is the most commonly used survival kit. Some people call them defence mechanisms, but it's the most commonly used survival kit. And that's why we have so many problems in our society today. So we're going to go through now some possible causes. Now, we're only going for an hour tonight, so I can't go through every single possible cause, but that's on the notes that I'm sending home with you. But I'm going to go through some key ones. So this should resonate with you because it's very topical this week, isn't it? Everyone know that image? Did you see the anger there? And we usually comment on the anger, don't we? But we really actually know they're scared, don't we? We know that, but we're seeing the anger. We'll comment on the anger. We'll get annoyed with them for being angry, and we'll have our own reaction to it. But really, it's the fear and anxiety underneath that's driving that anger. So what's being threatened there? This is your chance to be on a live stream. We were talking about those 4 needs. What's being threatened that made those women fight over the toilet rolls? Because we're all getting a sense of it at the moment, aren't we? Survival, safety, isn't it? It's not about innocence at the moment. It's about survival. People are starting to panic because their safety and survival is being threatened. And we're all operating in a certain way to keep that a bit calm. And the way they're doing it is like anger is helping them to deal with the anxiety. And it's not really helping. It's not helping at all, because anger always damages somewhere. So that's one of the possible causes. Another possible cause is that someone is being dominated due to a lack of boundaries and assertiveness skills. So you can see there in the image I've selected who's being dominated, and they have the inability to be assertive. So they're clamming up, clamming up, clamming up, clamming up. Now, you can't keep clamming up for your whole life. I know that because I tested my husband on it. I'll just say hi to my husband if he's watching. But do you know what I mean? I would go on and on and on and on about something until he eventually, after a long time, went, just stop it. Like clam up, and then blow up. So it's a blow up in order to regain some balance of power. But relationships should have a balance of power, boundaries around the way we treat each other, and assertiveness skills to actually speak the truth and not be fearful of the reaction. That's healthy. But this can actually cause a depressed or a suppressed anger and becomes an old anger, and it turns into resentment and bitterness if it actually doesn't get healed. So that can turn into quite an unpleasant relationship. Number 3, something else that can cause anger is to avoid the truth and the unbearable feeling it will invoke. Now, an unbearable feeling is something we find so hideous, so abhorrent, that we cannot stand to feel it at all. So the images I've selected there represent female and male in general, okay? It's not to stereotype, but there's a general trend that females find it absolutely unbearable to be unheard. And so if that's totally unbearable, that you can't stand being unheard or not heard, then you'll keep going and raising your voice and getting louder and louder and angrier because it's so unbearable not to be heard. Females in general also do not like to be shut out or uncared for. They're the top 3 in all the tens of thousands of hours of counselling that David Riddell did, who wrote the course. He says they are the top 3 unbearable feelings for women: to be unheard, to be shut out, to be uncared for.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Siri's watching. Put that over there. It does that out again, even when I'm in class. For males, their unbearable feeling are quite different. In general, they cannot stand to be disrespected. They cannot stand to feel powerless, and they cannot stand to feel inadequate. Now, if any of those unbearable feelings are triggered, it's a word that even kids use today, it can result in a lash out, an anger outburst. There's a whole seminar just on dealing with unbearable feelings. So I won't go into it tonight, but just know they exist. We all have them. We don't have heaps of them, but we've got some key ones that sit there, and you know you've got one if you have one of those clam up or blow up, like an over-the-top reaction. If you have an over-the-top reaction, someone has hit your trigger and bam, there's been a reaction, or a sudden withdrawal, I'm out, I'm gone. The whole purpose of this program is to actually downgrade any unbearable feeling that people have, to bring it right down so it's unpleasant. It'll never be pleasant, it'll never be okay, but bring it right down so it's unpleasant, but it's not unbearable that you have an over-the-top reaction. You just get used to a very uncomfortable feeling, but you don't react to it. So that's downgrading the unbearable feeling. If you want more notes on that in particular, I can send them to you. You can just write to me. The next one is anger can be the result of grief or loss. Now, when we think of grief or loss, we think of the big things. We think of death or accidents or divorce, but grief can also be just simply changing schools, moving from year 4 to year 5 and getting a new teacher. It can be the loss of course, a pet, and that's very big for some people. But it's not always the big things, it's just a change. Now, at the moment, we're looking at different things we're going to keep running, as we were talking about before, and things that might be cancelled. And disappointment comes with that. And our children will be disappointed when some things are cancelled. And that can result in an anger outburst. But that's grief, and dealing with grief and helping them understand it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be disappointed. In fact, being disappointed is a normal part of life, and actually it can happen every day to us, feeling disappointed at some level. Then they won't get stuck in it. They won't get stuck in the anger, but treating it as normal, and grief and loss is a normal part of life, will help them to move through it better, and will help us to move through it better. I'll talk at the end about different things we can say to ourselves and children that help coach us through disappointment. But just know that grief or loss, if someone has suffered a loss and anger is their state, you can actually say it's a normal part of grieving. It's a normal part of loss. And it doesn't have to be interrogated so much as the others. So another cause of anger is guilt, creating an intense internal stress. So it's deep anger and frustration at oneself. So which of the needs is being threatened there? Remember the 4 needs? I'll give you a clue, it's the last one. Innocence, the need for innocence. And so guilt, having guilt and shame can cause an enormous amount of stress. As Christians, and some of us here are Christians, I don't know who is, and I'm not sure who's online either, but as Christians we draw peace from having a Saviour that helps with our shame and guilt. That's the message of the gospel, that Jesus actually came to actually carry that shame and guilt, because it's so big for us to carry. Now, we all make mistakes, we all do the wrong things, and most of us have done things that we're terribly ashamed of. But that discontent, or that internal stress we feel from guilt can actually cause deep anger and resentment, and lashing out at children and bullying children. That need for innocence is so strong. And so we've got to be careful that we don't treat children poorly who remind us of ourselves. It's a bit of a stumbling block, is when we see a child that reminds us of the side of us we don't like, we can treat them poorly as well. So we need to be clear on that one, that guilt can actually create anger. We can be idealistic and have unrealistic expectations. A lot of us have grown up with, Leonie shared about this the other day, it was great, about the fairy tale ending, how life's going to go. This is how I think life will be, and this is how I want my life to be mapped out. But we find that having that idealism that was fed to us in storybooks, I must say, but having those high expectations can create disappointment along the way, because life isn't turning out how we dreamed it would be. And so that can cause disappointment as well. So we spend a bit of time at school giving students some truth coaches around that. Truth coaches are statements you say to yourself to encourage you when you get disappointed. And things we'll say is, sometimes life is fair and good and sometimes it isn't. But if their belief or their assumption is that life must be fair and good all the time, then they're going to be disappointed. And they're going to be disappointed, which will cause anger. Or sad things happen to good and bad people all the time, or at different times. But it doesn't just, bad things don't happen to bad people and good things to good people. And we can have the assumption that that's the truth, but it's not. Bad and sad things can happen to good and bad people every now and then. And so it's really important we do teach ourselves and teach our children to be okay with disappointment. And so the truth coach for that is learning to be okay with disappointment will make me a great person. How do I deal with disappointment? How do I deal with change? How do I deal with those threats? If I can coach myself through them, then I am a resilient person. And we say, you're a great person if you can do that. So there's some of the causes we looked at. And like I said in the notes, there are more. There are definitely more. But we need to have a look at how we can trace the anger. These are some powerful questions you can ask yourself if you're trying to work out the root of your anger. Because we know that fear is at the base of it, but what is going to actually bring that to our awareness? So questions that you can ask are, what feeling am I so allergic to that I would rather scare my family and friends than face up to it? So I'm going to just give you a few moments to think on these questions, but what is the feeling I'm so allergic to that I would rather scare my family and friends than face up to it? Another one, are my expectations realistic? Are my expectations too high? Do I set myself up for constant failure because my expectations are too high? Powerlessness can be a cause for anger, so you need to ask the question, when and where did my feelings of powerlessness or rejection or not feeling heard, any of those unbearable feelings, when did they first begin? And if I was to give you time to sit here and think, you would trace right back to a moment in time when you first felt that awful emotion. Oh, that was the first time I felt rejected, and you can't think of a time before that. So when and where did my feelings of powerlessness first begin? The next one, where might I be trying to avoid reality or correction? Where might I be trying to avoid reality? Someone's trying to tell me the truth. Someone's trying to correct me on something. Why am I avoiding that so much? Where might I be trying to avoid reality or correction? And why? The next one, what will it cost me if I let this grudge go? So that's that resentment and anger towards someone for hurting you or having a relationship problem. What will it cost me if I let this grudge go? Next one, is my anger or rage my friend or my enemy? Why do I need to be angry? And what purpose is it serving? Is there another and better way to get control, to stay safe or to fix the problem? What is the alternative I've lost sight of? And that's what we find, is that people do not have another alternative. They don't have another track in their minds to help coach them through disappointment. This is all they've got. I need to control it to stay safe. But what we're going to do soon is put alternatives in our brains. So we've got something else to go to, so we don't resort to anger. And what is the reassurance I need to hear before I let my guard dog go? Now, the guard dog is the anger. Remember, the guard dog's protecting the fear underneath, or something else underneath. What is the reassurance or the truth coach I need to hear before I let my guard dog go? So I'll give you some now, and I have printed more because you need them and our children need them. So this is a good one. They keep pressing my buttons, so someone else keeps pressing my buttons, but why am I still providing the buttons for them to press? So we actually need to ask ourselves the question, because we do say that a lot, but it's blame shifting. Why do I still have buttons that people press? I need to look at myself and think, why is there a button there? If the button's being pressed, if it's being triggered, then it's something I need healed inside of me. You can't do surgery on yourself, but you need to get some kind of professional help to help heal that trigger, that bruise that is causing a reaction. You need to be able to say their anger is about their stuff and they need to deal with that. I'm responsible for my own healing, except if they're your children, of course. If they're our children, they're in our care and we need to help them deal with the anger. But if it's another adult, their anger, that's their stuff. I'm not responsible for their stuff. I'm responsible for myself and my own healing. And for those that have faith, this anger is an indication I need to allow God to dig deeper into the reasons why. We can pray and we can say, God, reveal to me why I'm having this reaction. Help me find someone that can help me heal that. But we can actually ask God, because that's what He calls us to do. He calls us to transform and become healthier and have healthy minds. And so He will provide a way for you to dig deeper into the reasons why you have those reactions. It's very important we know that having a flexible mind is a relaxed mind, and relaxed minds don't need anger. Being flexible emotionally is a really important place to be, a healthy place to be. Being flexible in our minds. So we need to think about our children. What can we do for our children here at school and at Ormeau State School? Welcome. What do we do for our children? We love our children dearly. Obviously, families and parents love their children, but teachers love your children too. They really do. So what can we do to help children manage anger? First of all, we need to allow them to be heard. It's one of the most difficult things in our fast-paced, rapid life where technology is dominating, but we have to give children the opportunity to speak and be heard. And we need to let them know we're listening and we value what they're saying. It's really hard. It sounds easy, but it's actually very difficult to actually sit down, particularly if you've got more than one child. It's really difficult to sit down and listen for them to be heard. Not for them to tell you what to do, but to actually hear them and their perspective and validate it. We also need to teach them to be able to listen to others in the same way that we're modelling to them. So we get them to learn about other people's perspectives. So they're not always assuming life is through their lens, that other people have different experiences and different perspectives, and asking them, what would it like to be in their shoes? What do you think it'd be like to be in their shoes in this situation? How difficult do you think that would be for them? So we have to get them thinking outside themselves and about other people and their perspectives. Very importantly, we need to teach them how to be assertive. Now, it's very important that I write this, but it's not being passive, it's not being aggressive. Assertive is the balance in between. And that is being able to speak the truth gently to people, not hiding the facts, not twisting the truth, not speaking up and staying silent. It's about speaking the truth gently. That's what being assertive is. That and being able to negotiate are the two top skills you can teach your children, aside from now washing their hands for 2 songs of happy birthday. So teaching them negotiation skills is really important. Not when they're young, but as they're progressing through primary school, you start to give them opportunity to make propositions, and then you can counter proposition them and you can negotiate. But when they're young, you really just need to ask them what to do nicely, and they follow your instruction as the parent. You need to have that authority. But as they get older, you do teach them how to actually negotiate, because negotiation skills are so important from every point on in their life. You need to help them feel safe. If they don't feel safe, we know now that they can get angry. So you are the adult, and you need to become centred and emotionally stable. So that helps children to be safe. That and boundaries. Boundaries help children feel safe. You need to model healthy relationships and healthy conflict. Again, there's a whole seminar just on that. Healthy conflict and healthy relationships. Teach them, as we are currently doing, teach them that feeling disappointed is okay, and it happens often, and it happens in varying degrees. It might be a mild disappointment today, it might be a greater disappointment tomorrow, but disappointment is part of life. Teach them about grief, and that it's normal to grieve even the small things. So not to get angry, but to actually grieve and feel sad and feel disappointed. And don't feel the need to rescue them from it. Actually allowing your children to experience disappointment and grief helps them grow and mature. If we keep protecting our children from disappointment, they will be adults that tantrum and expect to get their own way all of the time and expect other people to rescue them. We don't want that. We need to actually allow them to feel the disappointment. I do tell the story many times. It's my $5,000 story. I tell about the time I went to take my daughter overseas on a holiday, and her passport had expired by 3 days or something like that, or there wasn't 6 months on it. So you need that 6 month. And so we ended up not going on this trip we've been planning, our mother-daughter trip. And it was an expensive lesson, but my natural instinct was to go book another holiday very quickly to make up for what she'd lost, because she was so disappointed. And I had to hold myself back. I just thought, I have to just let her sit in this awful place of disappointment. Now, missing out on a holiday in the scheme of the world is not a big deal, although it's happening a lot at the moment, I've noticed. But I thought, if I rescue her from this disappointment, the next disappointment is going to be harder. She needs to know that life is hard at times, and it's disappointing and it's painful. And it actually physically hurts, that disappointment. And I just had to let her sit in it. We want to rescue our kids from that pain because we don't like the pain. but it's not going to do them any favours. I'll just, on the side, I'll tell you what rescuing is. It's doing something for someone else. It doesn't have to be a child. Doing something for someone else that they can actually do for themselves. That's the definition of rescuing. But what I was tempted to do was make up for the loss. But I thought, no, this is actually something that we both need to work through, feel the pain of it, and wait for that pain to pass. Not dull the pain, not try and do other things to distract from the pain, but we actually have to sit in the pain, feel the pain, and the pain eventually passes. And those of you that have lost family members, you know the pain can go on for a long time, but if you sit in it and allow it, it will eventually pass. Good, healthy thinking helps that to pass quicker. Teach them that saying no does not mean never. Children assume if you say no, they think that means never, ever, ever again. That's it. So just say no doesn't mean never. It's just no, not now. It's not yet. No. But they need to learn to hear no as well. Teach them to balance expectations. Get their expectation. Do you think you're aiming a little bit too high? Do you think your expectations are a little low? One year my son said to us, and he's a reasonably bright boy, I'm going to aim for C's this year, and C's at his school was average, not like our C's here. So let's just say a D. I'm going to aim for a D. We went, I don't know. Like, do you think you should lift those expectations up a bit? Which he did, but he was just looking for a cruisy year, I think. Model teachability. Teachability means humility. I am able to be taught and corrected. It's okay to be at fault if you learn from it. We teach our kids it's okay to fail. It's okay to make a mistake. I could not get up and speak like this if I was too scared of making a mistake. I just assume I will make a mistake at some point. But it's really important that we are teachable ourselves and that we teach our children to be teachable. And you can only learn if you allow mistakes and you learn from them. You reflect back. Teach them to have a flexible mind. Example, a change can be an opportunity. And Leonie and I were just talking today that there's so many opportunities that are coming out of, for example, the number of people we can have gathered together. So the opportunity has now come up that we can actually live stream. We thought, oh wow, what a great opportunity. Thank you, Thomas, for coming up with that idea. But it is, sometimes changes, we don't need to get disappointed. We need to go, okay, there could be opportunities here that we haven't seen before. And it's good to speak that in front of your children. What opportunities are coming out of this? Okay, so you can't do this, but what else is there? Oh, maybe we can spend more time together as a family if we're not all going to go to that event. So you never know. Keep looking for opportunity and speak that. That will help with your child's flexibility of mind. Apologise if you've lost their trust by your own anger outbursts. Children are very, very forgiving, but you need to apologise if you have had an outburst of anger, because instantly children lose trust with you. They don't want to lose that trust, they love you. But if you apologise and say, hey, I'm really sorry, I got really angry, but I'm actually a little bit worried about something and it came out as anger and I really am sorry I took it out on you. You'll be forgiven like that. They just want peace with you. Heal your own wounds by seeking professional help so your family will heal too. When I started learning this course, my whole family didn't have to do the course because my healing actually impacted my family and they began to heal as well as a result. So again, important to look at. What are the triggers? What are the buttons? What are my reactions? Is it something that I need to address so that I heal and that healing overflows into my family? So there's some tips for children, but it seems like a long list, but we are a community here at Livingston, and we want to support families, and that's why we have seminars like this. We want to actually give information that's helpful for building healthy families and communities. We're passionate about it here. We run programs in the school which teach those skills, anti-bullying programs and things like that, but more importantly, the skills in assertiveness and boundaries and negotiation, they're important. We call that program Empower, and that's up there. Or our Bridge Builders program, where it's conflict resolution. So kids are taught how to actually resolve their own conflicts without adult interference. But they need to be trained up in it. We cannot assume our children are just absorbing the good things and not the bad. We have to be actually intentional in teaching them these skills. Our My Life Rules program is wonderful because it is a program that we run in the primary school that is pretty much a series of statements or truth coaches that help build resilient minds. There's just little cards like this, and because you've come tonight, you're going to get a pack. That's for those that have come. I bought a little pack. I thought, I know there's not going to be many here because you're all online, but for those that actually came out, I'm going to give you a pack because these are the most powerful things I've ever used as a teacher and a chaplain in teaching kids. There are 10 big rules like this, and on the back there's 6 sub-rules. And they're all those statements that help build and encourage your mind. It replaces the negative thinking, the thinking that drags you down and discourages you, to actually encouraging. So that's our My Life Rules. I've got a couple of posters here I'm going to show you because they're relevant. They're relevant to our topic. So when dealing with anger, I don't know if you can read them from here. In dealing with anger, which one of those truth coaches would help? Or dealing with disappointment, because that's anger's our disappointment energy. Would you like to read it out? You said number 3.
Yeah, 3.
3?
Sad things happen to good and bad people every now and then.
So that was our truth coach today on our assembly, and we had some beautiful Year 6 students do a little skit, and they brought a real puppy in, Mrs. Erickson's puppy, and they did this skit about a little girl losing her puppy and her disappointment, and they came up with this, and they actually demonstrated to the rest of the school that actual truth coach. So we focus on one of these every 2 weeks. We dwell on it for 2 weeks and then we move to another one. And all our truth coaches align with our Bible program as well. So here's one. Rule 6 is our faith one. Which one there would help with disappointment? Mm-hmm.
6. Yeah.
Do you want to read 6?
God is not the problem when things are bad or sad.
Yeah, so we can have a lot of people saying we don't believe in God, but when things go bad, they go, it's God's problem. People can default quickly to that, but God's not the problem when things are bad or sad. God actually is sad too. So that's our My Life Rules program. They're very, very powerful. So there's 70 of those, and we've aligned them all through. Over the next 2 years, we get to go through each one of those 70 truth coaches. So we're supporting families, but we would like families to continue to come in and listen to seminars like this. They're on offer at least once a term and now online, which is great. But that's how we're working as a community, to raise resilient children that don't default to anger as their way of coping in life. Wouldn't it be marvellous if this generation we bring up reduces that epidemic of anger? So that's our goal. Everything we do, it's woven through all our curriculum. We are so passionate about developing the whole child, spiritually, emotionally, socially, physically. Every aspect of a child we are passionate about, and that's why we will keep bringing these talks to you. But if you want further information on anything that I've spoken about, the author of the program, David Riddell, that's his details there. And you can get online, and there's a plethora of resources just linked with his site. But he lives in New Zealand, and he's done at least, get this, 60,000 hours of counselling. He is an experienced counsellor, and he has developed this program over 30 years, and it's probably the most powerful program I've ever been involved in. And Joan Costello, she's the author of My Life Rules. She lives in Brisbane. She's currently in Uganda with David, actually, taking these schools and lectures over there. But she's the author of that. They're both the authors of those, which condensed a large 3-week adult course into 10 cards. So they're quite powerful. But if you want any other information that I can help you with, please email me. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about this. Same for people online. This PowerPoint can be accessed. You can email me to get a copy of that, or the notes as well. But thank you so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it, and make sure you get your notes from the door and a pack of those truth cards, okay? So thanks very much. Good night.